Joyce, can you tell us what your connection to MSRGN is and share a little bit of history about this connection?
Well, I started with the Mountain States Genetics Regional Services Network, a mouthful, back in 1985 when it first was supported by the federal government as a grant. And we applied in 84 and received funding in 85. And at that time, I was a project coordinator, and we had a project director who was Dr. Bob McCurdy. We only had two staff people, and it was I was part time for a few months, and then we soon realized that in order for this project to really function, it was going to take someone full time, and so I became a full-time employee of the state of Colorado and the Mountain States Genetics Network.
Thank you, Joyce. And I know you went on to do many more iterations of that grant. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, the grant was funded for a 3-year period. And beginning later on, they did 5 years, or I think a couple of times, but mainly it was 3 years. And it the network evolved over those years quite a bit, from 6 states to 7 states to 8 states. So the needs from 1985 to 2002, when it was funded by the federal government, certainly expanded and changed a great deal.
You adopted Texas and Nevada
And
over time.
yes, yes.
And we always joke that there are mountains in Texas, because that's always a sticking point, right? People think there are no mountains in Texas, but there are.
That there are in Western Texas, and we have one consumer that brought a book to one of our meetings, a coffee table book on the mountains in Texas, Western Texas. So for real.
For real. Oh, thank you for sharing that history. And you went on to continue in your role with Mountain States all the way through this current grant cycle that we're wrapping up in May. But you were very integral in the state team coordinator role and helping the state teams a lot. Do you want to talk just a little bit about that, since it's applicable to this grant cycle that we're in right now?
Well, the state teams, we needed to make a change and to meet the needs of both of our federal granting office and of the region. And so rather than have committees, which were task force, which we had for many years, we went to state teams to meet the needs of the individual states. And I think the beauty, whether you call them committees or state teams, is that in mountain states, we did a merging of both consumers and providers, so that a state team allowed for that merging to become, I think, even stronger. Um, because consumers are the backbone, the heart of what the Mountain States Regional Network has always been.
Thank you, Joyce. That is something very special about this region, is the merging of all voices, all folks around the table, bringing that together. And I know you lived and breathed that for many years. Just one more question on the history, just while we're on that question. What about, you said about till 2002? What happened after 2002? And maybe bring us up to speed a little bit on what happened then, because I know there was a little bit of a gap.
That's true. In 2002, the federal government, in their wisdom, no sarcasm intended, they said they were no longer going to fund regional networks, that they were going to deal with the states individually. And at that time, our funding ended. I retired from the health department at that time too. But we had set up, as had a couple of the other regions, a 501c3 to accompany the Mountain States Network, and had been putting funding through fundraisers, etc., into that foundation, and that was called the Mountain States Genetics Foundation. Um, the foundation had its own board, and it provided the means, resources, both monetarily and staff wise, because I then became director of the foundation, and provided a means for the network to continue on a limited basis. We couldn't supply grants like we did, and do some of the activities that we would have loved to have kept going, but we did have committees and we did have an annual meeting, and that helped with the cohesiveness of maintaining the network to last until, for 5 years, I believe it was 07, when the feds realized that trying to manage 50 states and 2 territories was a bit beyond what they could really manage. And they brought back the regional collaboratives. New name.
New name, right? New name, but similar mission, correct, as before?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And then that brings us up to probably 2007 to 2017, when the name changed again to the Mountain States Regional Genetics Networks, and the mission broadened, right, to all genetic conditions.
Well, exactly. But what I think is interesting, we were truly a network. Networking was what made us, what maintained us, and gave us the availability to be able to function to meet the needs of the region. And I'm not sure networking was really understood by our federal office, to the extent that we applied it here in this region. But interestingly, we went from network to collaborative, and back from collaborative to network. So I
Full
think
circle, full circle.
full circle. Yes.
Thank you for stressing that, because I think you're right. It's always been about the networking and the network that has existed. So what are some of your memories, fond or funny, of Mountain States, in whichever iteration you'd like to talk about it? And I'm sure you have many.
There are, and there are many that I wouldn't dare share. But I think early on, we had some fun with my last name. That came up every now and then in meetings, etc. And one of the times we were getting ready to have the genetic drift, which many will remember, but this is in the past, so it's not still published. But we published this educational newsletter, and we were getting together in Carmel. I was going to go out there and meet with 4 of our board members, our advisory committee, to talk about the development and how we could go about this. And all 4 of them, their name was John. So our little group became known as 4 Johns and a Hooker. And we started the genetic drift, and it was a wonderful publication. I think my fondest memories were of our annual meetings and our committee meetings. We had 8 committees to meet all of the needs of the region, and to stay on ahead of technology and be able to make sure that it was being available, and quality assessment was being done here in this region. And but our annual meetings were built around networking. We did hikes, and I remember particularly one hike, and I say hike, not strenuous, a little bit more so than a walk, but we had to be careful because we had our members from Arizona and Texas who had to be aware of our altitude, and we had our annual meetings in the mountains. So we'd be on a hike, and there were at least three that I'm aware of grants that were applied for that came out of our members talking while hiking. And that when we first started, excuse me, when we first started, this region had vast geographic areas, few services, uh, and not all states had newborn screening labs. Colorado provided for 4 states. One state went out of the region, so that people were isolated. Consumers, providers, they didn't know each other. Providers didn't know who their counterparts were in other states. And so the support system developed very quickly. And where other states had some competition between providers, we didn't. We embraced the fact that we now had a forum where we could meet, we could talk, we could share problems. Trust was a big part of it. And so this region operated somewhat differently. We were more cohesive, lots of camaraderie. Uh, I think those items, those are the things that I just cherish. The friendships that were made, very lasting friendships, and got to know each other's strengths and talents and skills, and how to incorporate those, so we could have better service system.
What impact has MSRGN had in the field of genetics?
Massive. Um, you don't know what you have till you don't have it. And sadly, I think that's what the next version of all this will be.
Our last question we'll wrap up with any other just thoughts or comments about the Mountain States region, or any of the history, or just thoughts or comments as we wrap up.
Well, I've talked about this consumers and the providers, but I could not leave and not talk about our staff. And you'll hear on TV programs, we're a family, and we work together for a number of reasons so well. And from the beginning, for the most part, staff have been such a cohesive, loving, caring group for each other. And as you and I know, you need each other to be able to make it all work and be the best that we can be.